Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at how to incorporate hands-on and experiential learning into the primary classroom. Now, as teachers, we understand the importance of having hands-on and experiential learning within the classroom. We understand what it does and the fact that it can improve the understanding and enjoyment and learning. But how do we do it? Well, here are 10 quick ways that you can incorporate this type of learning into your classroom. First of all, use real life examples. By using real world examples, children can link their own experiences to it. They will have a better understanding, they will be more engaged in it, and they can apply their own personal knowledge, experiences, and situational events to your learning, to their learning. They will have a greater understanding if you make it more relatable to them in the real world. A personal favourite of mine, conducting experiments where possible, or just demonstrations. Hands-on experiments and demonstrations really engage students in their learning. Them being able to actively participate and see things firsthand rather than learning it through your own experiences or the experience of a video. It's so much more impactful. They are personally experiencing it for the first time themselves, and nothing can replace that kind of learning. Now, let's talk about assignments or projects, or even homework. Make them hands-on. Now, I had such a higher engagement and focus of children and enjoyment of the children when they were completing homework based on a creative activity rather than an academic one. If I told them to write a diary entry about a Victorian child in the workhouse, they didn't enjoy it, they wouldn't necessarily do it, or if they did, it wasn't their best. But if I said to them, okay, I want you to come up with 5 freeze frames and 1 short drama piece to present to the class of that exact same scenario, and they could do this individually or as a group, they were so excited. And they were doing the exact same thing. It was still learning how to recount an event. But by doing it in a more hands-on way that they got more control over, every single child in my class did it. Another example would be, rather than drawing what the exterior of a rocket or a Victorian schoolhouse or an Egyptian pyramid looked like, I gave them the task of creating one. Now, they could do this out of anything, and I could provide them resources if they needed it, but I had so many children spend time with their family using actual wood to build these Victorian schoolhouses, to build the pyramid where the top came off and you could see everything inside, where they made actual rockets that could move. It was astounding what they put their mind to, and they ended up learning so much more because they had to research such intricate moving parts, or how specifically to do the design, how different people from different eras decided to decorate different areas. It was astounding that every single child did it. They did it to the best of their ability. Their families got involved and they really enjoyed it and took something out of it. They remembered it every single year, what they had learned from that piece of homework, rather than a drawing they did in their book and a bit of research for a fact file. Another personal favourite of mine, not all teachers, but definitely me, is going out on experiences, excursions, go on a school trip. Educational outings are phenomenal, especially if it's an area that you yourself are not 100% sure on. Go somewhere where there are experts and they can teach your children. They can have them learn hands-on. They can immerse them in that world. Something as simple as going to the Natural History Museum or the Science Museum. That can be such an amazing experience. When I was there on a school trip with my class, we got to go into a section where we were excavating and we were finding dinosaur bones, and we had to try and figure out what dinosaur they belonged to. And it wasn't just, oh look, here it is, let's see. No, they got to actually dig around and use the correct tools, learn what the tools were, learn how to use them, why they were used, learn how to categorize, learn how to classify. They learnt so many skills just from this one 30-minute activity. let alone everything else we did that day. Going on trips is so beneficial. Now, it can be difficult, I know, depending on the price, the location, and what you can do. Sometimes you can reverse it and have someone come into your school. But one thing that I have learned is definitely look around at the other educational professionals that are in your building, parents of children, or anyone else you may know that has the relevant experience. I've been in schools before where family members of teachers that work in that specific job area have come in and run mini workshops with the classes. And they've done that at a discounted rate because of the family member that is the teaching professional. But it was just amazing that they could do that. Sometimes you'll have volunteers that come in. You've just got to see what you can find and what your school and the students and their families can afford. But I would highly, highly recommend going on school trips. Now, this one some children do struggle with. Some teachers like to try and avoid because it does, unfortunately, usually end in someone having a disagreement. But have collaborative group work. Don't just sit there and have children have to write their own paragraph or their own story. Yes, do that in the end, but start working slowly down towards it so that they can share all their ideas. Collaborative learning is so important. And if they're doing it with someone else, it's more hands-on, it's more verbal, they're talking back and forwards, they are bouncing ideas off each other. Even if it's something like a science experiment, working as a group, give them different roles. Who is the manager? Who is the researcher? Who is the equipment gatherer? Who does this? Who does that? If everyone knows what their role is, makes it go much smoother. Can even work, like I said, with writing. If you've started off with an example as a class, then as a group, have them all write something on a big piece of paper, and then they dwindle that down and write a paragraph as a group. Then they've got all these ideas. Take that paragraph back to their individual writing. They've got all of this to work on and bounce their brain off of because they collaboratively worked with someone and they had a hands-on experience of doing it themselves together. This one I feel is really important, and it can be difficult to do because of the cost, but where possible, incorporate technology into your classroom. We need to move with the times. Children now at home are on technology, staff, you're on technology. Whatever device you use, it's how the world is now, and we need children to be moving along with it. The world of technology is ever changing at a vast, fast rate. We need children to stay up to date with what is going on and improve their learning in the process by using all this different technology. Not sure yourself on how to answer a question? Google it. Ask Alexa. You can have simulations. You can create art. You can do maths. You can write. You can create experiments and log them on a computer. You can record yourself in drama. You can create a chart to map out your heart rate during PE. One of my lessons, we decided to have a bit more fun in maths because personally, making nets for shapes can be very tedious and a little bit boring. So instead of them having to draw it out initially, we went on our computer system and we were able to digitally create and design our own nets. And because we were doing this digitally, we were able to try something a little bit trickier because there were templates and there were tips and videos to help the children. So instead of having cubes or prisms, I had them making cars. I had them making buses and trains. One of them decided to make a tower building with doors that open. And it was phenomenal. They designed it on there, they printed one out as a backup, but then they'd got all their measurements, went back to the classroom and managed to use a ruler and a protractor accurately to be able to draw these nets out, build them, decorate them, and it was fantastic. It was the first time I'd truly seen children be that engaged in a maths lesson that involved making nets. Just think of the possibilities of what you can do in your classroom with a little bit of technology. Here's one that everyone usually does without even thinking about it. Using games in the classroom. Making things fun and as a game, children are more willing to participate. If you said to them, okay, we are going to do our times tables now. Usually you'll get, Oh, do we have to? However, if you say, right, I've got a game for us, we're doing our times table game, we can either do it where you have a physical item and you're like passing a ball round to each other, you don't know who's going to get the ball next, you have to say a times table and there's something else that corresponds to it. Or you can use, again, technology in the classroom and use something like hit the button. Great game, put it up on the interactive whiteboard, have them all go around as quick as possible, or have them out as tablets on the table and have them race each other. Fantastic. Have them go on times table Rockstar for that activity. So many different things you can do rather than filling out a boring multiplication grid or just sitting there and talking to each other and reciting it in numerical order. They need to be doing it out of order. So play a game. You can play a game for literally every single lesson. Do it for memory recall. Throw the ball around. You're working on their motor skills, a little bit of PE, fun engagement, but it's their recall that they're really working on. It's fantastic. Where possible, depending on school budget, provide hands-on learning resources. So, for example, if they are doing a lesson where they need to understand the key vocabulary, you can have them out, they can move them around on the table. If you're doing something in maths, you can have a place value chart or Deans or base 10, whatever your school calls them nowadays. Or you can have discs, cubes. The amount of resources you can use for lessons is endless. And having artifacts for things like RE and history or geography is fantastic. For children to be able to hold a globe and actually look around on the globe to find what they're doing, as well as an atlas, it makes quite the difference than you trying to explain it. For children learning about, for example, World War I or II, for them to actually be holding an example of a ration booklet, them being able to see it properly, being able to put on the clothing from the Victorian era, they are so much more involved and engaged in the lesson. You'll be surprised how much more learning you will do. And finally, offer time for them to self or peer assess. Now, it does take some training for your children to be able to do this, and it does need to tie in with your school's marking and feedback policy. But once you've got them trained on how to do it accurately, it's really good. And they can spot really quickly their errors and misconceptions. And if they can address them independently, fantastic, even better. But if they don't know how to, but they've identified, oh, there's an error, they immediately put their hand up, and it just helps you to formatively assess within that lesson and then be able to understand immediately rather than waiting for the next lesson when you've marked that mountain of books. Once I trained my children on it, they were able to provide their own feedback, and they used one of the techniques I taught them in the classroom called the learning zone. And especially up in Key Stage 2, which is where I am based, they would just write a little reply, not for absolutely every lesson, but for lessons where they have noticed a misconception, or if they think they've done really fantastic work, then they will write down their thoughts and I'll have a look at it later. Keep an eye out for a video on learning zones in the future. So, that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, then please make sure you hit that like button, click subscribe, and hit that little bell icon to make sure you stay up to date with all our latest videos that come out weekly. I'm Hannah, this is Primary Progression. Thanks for watching and have a great day.